this off, and I only got it on Wednesday. All right, it looks like the broadcast is live, so if you two just want to chat for another minute, in 1 minute. We'll be ready to
yeah. This is our pep talk we get every day. It's kind of crazy.
Well, it's 9 o'clock over there, but it's 1 o'clock here, so I'm way past pep talk.
Oh, wow. You've had lunch. You're ready to settle in for a long winter's nap, right?
Yeah, I'm kind of ready for the nap, actually, yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, my kids will be home in an hour and a half, so.
Oh, well, all right. Then we got to do this thing.
Right.
So are we all connected to all of our schools and everything, or let's find out. Yeah, we don't even know.
Yeah, we can see right here. So we have one viewer. Hi, viewer.
Hi, viewers. I don't know who you are, but.
No,
Hi, Mom. How did you find out about this?
I know. You put this out on Facebook, didn't you, Dave? Watch me.
A captive audience somewhere.
That's for sure. Oh, he drinks Diet Coke.
Things you don't know.
It's my beverage of choice.
Oh, you're Coke buddies.
We are.
All right, the time is 10 o'clock.
All right, so let's get started. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Dave. So I would like to welcome everyone. My name's Beth Rosania, and I am a member of the King County Library System Mock Newberry Committee. Every year, our committee reads and reads and reads new books all the time, thinking, what book would we pick if we were on the real Newberry Committee? Then we put together a short list of great books and have students in our area talk about them and vote on the book that they think is the winner. This year, one of our contenders is Ms. Bixby's Last Day. It's the story of an unforgettable teacher and 3 of her students who are determined to celebrate that last day. I'm excited to welcome John Dave Anderson, the author of Ms. Bixby's Last Day, who's here today to answer questions from our students and our teacher. So good morning, Dave. How are you doing?
Hey. Thank you for having me.
Yay. We have several classes watching live, and this is also being recorded so that others can watch it later. Our students have sent in a lot of questions that they'd love to get the answers to. So are you ready to get started?
I am ready to make stuff up as I go along. I hope
that sounds great. Let's do this. Okay. First of all, they want to know, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Indiana Jones.
Cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Good
There's no question. Like, because it's an instant answer, right? Because for 6 years, that was the whip and the fedora and the leather jacket and the whole get up. Like,
whole thing.
Awesome. Yeah. And then I realized that archaeologists didn't do what Indiana Jones does, right?
This is true.
Right? Yeah, they research and spend all their time in the library. And I was sort of disillusioned and had to find something else to do. So I had to find something where I could at least pretend to be Indiana Jones or somebody like him.
Right.
Right. And so naturally, of course, I became a writer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So at what stage in your life was that decision made? They want to know when you decided to become a writer.
When I decided to stop being Indiana Jones and become a writer, yeah. So I think I started writing in earnest. I mean, we're all writers, right? Everybody from
we all write. 3
on, yeah. You're already getting into that skill. And I think we actually write more now than we have at any other time in history. I mean, we produce more actual text in a given day than we did in the first 5,000 years of civilization, which is ridiculous. So, I mean, at what point do you say, all right, this is something I want to do, either as a very passionate hobby or for a living? And it probably was high school. That's when I wrote my first novel.
Okay.
It was like 150 pages, and I had this Brother word processor is what it was called. It was really a glorified typewriter with a 3.5-inch floppy disk drive. So you could save what you were working on, but then when you went to print it, basically you had to feed in 1 sheet of paper at a time, and then the word processor would type it out very slowly. And it took like 3 minutes to type out 1 page. So I wrote a 180-page novel called Lo to Be One with the Universe, which is sort of like satire science fiction. It took 5 hours to print it out. But when I was done, like, I had that big stack of paper, right? I mean, I had this huge sheet, and it was something I had put down all of those words, like 60,000, 70,000 words, my words, and I just held it and the weight of it. sort of convinced me that this was something that I could do. You know, even though that novel was terrible and nobody's ever read it, and I don't even know where it is anymore because nothing reads 3.5-inch floppy diskettes. But the point is, you sort of realize what you're capable of, and then you push yourself harder and harder. So I started in high school, and I got my first book published when I was 30.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, it's like
Did you
12
ever have any
years.
other jobs, or has it always been writing?
No, I've had all the good jobs you're supposed to have as an English major. I've been an English teacher, and I've been an editor, and I have been an academic counselor, and I have worked at McDonald's, and I have worked for landscaping and furniture companies and all the kinds of things that you do in order to make ends meet. It's really only been in the last few years that I've been able to write full time.
That's great. I understand. I'm an English major myself.
That's right. Android, right?
And I'm a librarian.
You're a librarian.
It's good.
So that's on the approved list.
It is. Okay. All right, let's get a little bit more serious for a minute. They would like to know, what is the story behind this book? What gave you the inspiration to write it?
I would love to say, well, not love to say, but I think a lot of people who ask this question are looking for the sort of one inspirational teacher that, you know, had this dramatic impact on my life. And the truth of the matter is there's been hundreds. Like, I was lucky enough to have lots of great teachers, whether it was in elementary school or high school or college. My wife is a teacher. She teaches middle school math. My mother was a teacher and is now a librarian. So I've been surrounded by teachers, but I can't point to just one and say that was the one, right? My Mr. Holland. So the story didn't actually start with Miss Bixby. It started with the three boys.
Okay.
And I set out wanting to write a story from three different points of view. Like, that was my challenge. I was like, I want to write a story about a quest, and I want to make sure that I have these three different points of view and that they're all sort of conflicting and contrasting, and they all have their own mystery, and you uncover what their mystery is as you go through the novel. And I wanted the story to be as much about the quest and the boys and their friendship as it was what they were questing for. And obviously the thing they're questioning for, sort of the catalyst, is Miss Bixby. And as I'm writing the novel and I'm revising it and I'm really getting into it, I'm starting to realize, I'm starting to discover the impact that she's had on their lives. You know, but I didn't go in knowing what that was. I went in knowing what it was for Brand, but not for the other two.
Okay.
It was a process of discovery.
All right. They want to know if you ever had friends like Steve and Toffer and Brand.
I was lucky enough to have friends like Steve and Toffer and Brand. Not all the time. And there was a period of my life where I don't think I had very many friends at all, and that kind of made me sad. But I did. I definitely. And you're very fortunate if you have a couple of people that you can go on a quest on, right? I think of Steve and Toffer and Brand as like knights errant. That Miss Bixby's Last Day is kind of a retelling of the Holy Grail myth, right? You can find these magic objects, then somehow you can do something to restore Camelot and restore King Arthur / Miss Bixby and all these things. And so, you know, these are your right-hand peeps, right? These are the guys that have your back, and you can count on them to lay in front of the train for you and all this stuff. And I've been fortunate to have a few of those in my life. And you only need a few, right?
Right.
You're lucky to have a few. So, yeah. And I hope it's a book as much about friendship as it is about anything.
It is. It is. So I think you touched on this a little bit, but they did ask, why are three people telling this story? So do you want to elaborate a little bit more on that? Or,
I think, it's an interesting question. And for me, it was not a thematic question or a plot question. It was an artistic challenge. I actually went out to do that on purpose. Like, that was one of my main reasons for writing the novel. And so, you know, it's first person narration. Just coming up with one first person voice is hard enough, right? Because you have to restrict yourself to that point of view, and you have to figure out what kind of language they use and what their background is and how that influences the way that they speak and, you know, their interaction with the world. And then I have to do it with two more, and then have to make all three of them sound unique enough that you can tell them apart. You know, it was fun, and it was artistically challenging, and that's what made it fun. And it was difficult at the same time. And I think a lot of the revision process was me teasing out those three voices. So, yeah, for me, it was just to see if I could do it, right? See if I could pull it off. But at the same time, it all goes into the service of the story. So each of these characters has their own issues. They have their own problems, and Miss Bixby affects them each in different ways. And so I think it adds a lot to have
it does.
the three different perspectives. Yeah.
So the next question is, they want to know, why did you make sixth graders?
Why did I make them sixth graders? So middle grade writing is like really tough for me in that respect, because I have a sort of elevated writing style. I can't write short books. Number one, I've tried, it doesn't work. All my books tend to be 300 pages or longer. And so I have to hit a really sweet spot of age where the kids are old enough that they can go on adventures like this, right? But young enough where they don't always have to kiss girls at the end. Or it doesn't have to be about dystopian vampires or something, where I can tell these sweet, hopeful stories with protagonists that actually have some utility. There's nothing more frustrating about writing middle grade novels than the fact that your main characters can't drive, right?
Yes.
You're sitting there as an author and you're like, all right, they need to get downtown. How are they going to do that? Are they going to walk? Are they going to take their bikes? Or are they going to take the bus? Because they can't drive. Why can't you drive? If you could just drive, I could get you from point A to point B so much easier. And so writing, for kids that are sixth grade or fifth grade, it's frustrating at some points. But it's great because this is the point where they're grappling with what it means to start to become an adult. And they're starting to question a lot of the things that they've been told by adults and have to create their own worldview. And by the time you're in high school, you're almost a little bit jaded. You're almost like, well, I knew all that was a bunch of lies, right? You're in middle school, or when you're in like fourth, fifth grade, you're like, I don't know, some of it could be true. I still want to believe that mankind is generally good, and that fairies exist, or whatever it is, and it's that mixture of hope and doubt and questions and faith and trust and all that stuff that comes together that I think is really wonderful about that age.
Great. Okay, so they wanted to know how long it took to write this story, like from beginning to end.
Yeah. Okay, so from beginning to end. It takes me about 2 months to write a novel. It's really fast, actually. Yeah. Some people it takes like 5 years, right? Not me. I can't wait that long. I've got to get to the end, right? And it's a very organic process. I probably shouldn't say this because the teachers are all going to be like, no, don't listen to him. So plug your ears. But I don't outline. I don't plan. There's no like notes anywhere. I sit down every day and I just go, right? I just sit down and blah, blah, blah. So the result is that in 2 months I get a novel. And the drawback to this is that after 2 months I have a really bad novel. And so I have to spend the next 4, 5, 6 months revising it, probably because I didn't plan things out, because I didn't outline, because these plot points don't make any sense. Thankfully, I have an excellent editor named Jordan who helps me tease out all these details and put it all together. So I like to get a first draft as quickly as I can. And then after that, I go back and fix all my mistakes.
Okay. So how many drafts did this book have?
I want to say Miss Bixby probably went through 8 or 9.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah. It was pretty intense. I would say I probably changed 40 to 50% of it, on a sentence by sentence basis over the course of revising it. I think the basic story stayed in place, but again, when you have 3 different narrators and you're trying to create these different voices, there's a lot of sentence level, word choice level issues that you have to be concerned with. And I think I was tinkering with it right up until the last minute. I was like, no, don't send it to the printer yet. I want to change this word. And I'm sure that frustrated my publisher, but that's just the way it is.
Yeah. What was your favorite part of this book?
Oh, I have a lot of favorite parts.
Ooh, tell all.
Yeah, what's my favorite part? So I'll just name 2.
Okay.
One of my favorite parts, because I think it's kind of funny and it's really awkward, and because I'm really surprised I got away with it, is there's the scene, and I don't know how much I can give away, so I'll be kind of vague.
Okay.
But there's a scene where the 3 boys find themselves in an establishment that sells alcoholic beverages.
I recall that.
Looking for a perfect bottle of wine that would go with a white chocolate cheesecake. Of course, they know nothing about wine, and they have a really stupid plan for acquiring said bottle of wine. And of course, this ends in disaster as only it can, but I don't know a whole lot about wine either, so I had to do some research to try and find like what wine would go with white chocolate cheesecake. And so I'm getting all these like Italian names, and I'm thinking to myself, you know, like, what would a sixth grader think if they're just confronted with row upon row of all this stuff? And so it was really hilarious. It was funny to me to write. And then contrast that with probably my favorite moment in the book, which is what happens on the hill. You know, there towards the end, because everything came together for me, and I cried, and other people cried, and you know,
we all cried.
It was one of those moments, you know, and I think it makes the book.
It does. It does. Okay. Did you ever get stuck and run out of ideas while you were writing the book?
For Miss Bixby, no. In fact, one of the interesting things about Miss Bixby is that I had too many ideas. And I think you can see that in the novel because it jumps around a lot. Obviously, there's a lot of flashback, and you have the 3 different narrators. And there was so much I wanted to put in about each of their worldviews and their philosophies. I mean, he has some really interesting things to say about love, for example. And obviously, Topra has a really interesting way of looking at the world to make himself look bigger in that world than he is, because he just wants to get noticed. And so it was always a question. It was a question of me of trimming down, like what's absolutely essential to get across from these characters in terms of their past, because I could have written the same number of pages from one point of view, probably. I could have just taken Bran and written 300 pages about Bran and Miss Bixby and his relationship with his father and what it's like for him, you know, growing up. And I didn't. And so as a result, I really had to compact a lot into each of their chapters.
Yeah. Okay. So have you written other books, and of all of your books, okay, this is like that parent question, which of them is your favorite?
Right. No, I get this question a lot. Yeah. So my first novel was called Standard Hero Behavior.
Oh, hello.
Yeah. And if you're out there, Mom, yeah, you own the only 3 copies of this. 5 years later, right, I wrote this book, which is called Sidekicked. Superhero, a superhero sidekick whose superhero doesn't save him anymore, right? Because his superhero has other issues, and so he has to somehow find a way to save himself. And I liked it so much that I wrote a kind of companion novel called Minion, which takes it from the other point of view of a guy, you know, whose stepfather makes weapons for, you know, the black market, and so he's got to deal with that and legal gray areas and right and wrong are questioned and all this stuff. But I love fantasy, and I grew up reading fantasy, and I grew up on Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and Lloyd Alexander and Dungeons and Dragons. And so I came back to it and wrote a book called The Dungeoneers, which is called like, I don't know, Dungeons and Dragons meets Harry Potter, right? So there's lots of spell casting and fun stuff and monsters and ogres. And then Miss Bixby's Last Day. And then actually I've published 2 books this year. So Miss Bixby's Last Day came out in the summer. And then this book, Insert Coin to Continue, just came out a couple months ago.
Cool.
So yeah, and there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of action and excitement stuff. Miss Bixby's Last Day is probably the only realistic novel in the bunch.
So you sidestepped.
Oh, so what?
They're all your favorite, right?
They're all my favorite. So my favorite novel that I've ever written is whatever novel I'm working on at the time. So right now I'm actually writing like a...
Whoop, we lost you. Are you still there, Dave?
Hey?
We've
Did
got
I fade out?
you. Well, try again.
Uh-oh. Slow motion? No, we're frozen.
We can hear you.
We could hear you.
Okay, I'm good?
We're good.
Okay, good. Yeah, you kind of froze out on me there for a little bit. So I would say my favorite is probably between Mrs. Bixby's Last Day and The Dungeoneers. Just because this one was so much fun to write and so easy, and I love the characters. But Miss Bixby probably stretched me as an artist more than anything else.
Cool. So they want to know if you're going to be using these characters in future books, or is this a standalone book?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think it's done. I kind of told that story, and I feel that way about almost all of my books. Like I finish it and I'm totally ready to move on to a new world, new people, too many ideas floating around inside this crazy head to come back to these folks. And I think that's okay, because I think one of the cool things about being a writer and being a reader in that relationship is that you kind of say, all right, this is the last page, but that doesn't mean the story ends, obviously. Right. You got your own imagination, man. What do you think happens, right? You tell it. Just, don't use my words, because then I'll come and sue you. But no. The point is, right, we extend the stories, we take the narratives and we extend them into our own lives, and we see what we can learn from them, and we grow from them. And I do that with the books that I read, right? I imagine what if after I've read them. And I think that's really cool. And I love that readers can do that. And so I don't feel bad that I'm never going to come back to Brandon, Topher, and Steve. They'll be fine. They got each other.
They'll be good. They'll take care of each other. Yeah, you're right. So they want to know, what are you working on now?
Well, I told you about the sci-fi pirate thingy, which, may never even get published, but I'm having fun writing it. I have a book that comes out this May, which is called Posted, which is realistic fiction, and it deals with the subject of bullying and the power of language and how our words can have so many long-reaching effects that we're not even aware of. Right. And it tells the story of cell phones get banned at this school, and as a result, kids just start leaving Post-it notes on each other's lockers. And it starts out fairly innocent and kind of jokey, and then it gets really derogatory and mean-spirited. And so it starts a Post-it note war, essentially. So it's about this group of friends and how the war kind of breaks them apart, and how they try to pull themselves back together. So it's kind of intense. So then the book that comes after that is going to be about fairies. Okay.
We'll be looking for them. All right. This is getting down to the nitty gritty. When you write a book, do you prefer to dictate it, handwrite it, use a typewriter, use a computer, or do you just send your ideas telepathically?
Wow. I would love to send my ideas telepathically.
Wouldn't that be cool?
It would be really cool. Yeah. Except for then it'd be even more scattered. I think there's something about having a focusing instrument, whether it's a pencil or a typewriter or a keyboard, that allows you to stay on task. Like if it was telepathic, then I'd probably write 2 sentences of the novel, and then there'd be a grocery list in there, and then there'd be my musings on what the snow looks like outside, and then there'd be me scratching my armpit. So that's probably not a good idea. I use a computer. I type 80 to 85 words a minute, and so that's the only way that my fingers can keep up with my brain.
Wow.
If I was to handwrite it out, there would be no way, plus the
brain would be so far ahead of what you wanted to say. Yeah. Cool.
But I admire people who can get old-fashioned like that.
I agree. All right, this is an even more nitty-gritty question. They want to know, why does the book have a red cover?
Really? They want to know that, huh? I don't know.
Well, maybe we could stretch that out and just you could talk about how maybe you don't have control over what color the cover is.
Exactly. I have so little control over the cover, it's kind of ridiculous. That's not true. They'll do it. The first thing they do, for those of you who don't know, which is kind of interesting, is that they pick whoever the designer or illustrator is going to be for the cover. And they do run that by me, which is cool. They're like, do you like this guy or girl style, and this is the kinds of things that they've done. And I usually almost always say yes, because I don't feel like I have the power to say no, and because they haven't get me wrong yet. And so they get the artist and the illustrator, and then they come up with basically mock-ups of what it could look like. And they're like, do you like this? And I always say yes, again, because I don't feel like I can say no. But what I do say is, I really like it. Could you maybe change the blah, 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 right? And I pick out 1 or 2 things that I think would be cool if they could change to make it fit more with what my vision of the book should look like, right? And so this was the very first, this was pretty much it, conceptually, from the beginning. It used to be there was a whole lot more stuff on the door. There was drawings, that Topher might have done, and there were cards from Miss Bixby and all this stuff. And slowly that stuff got picked away to go with the sort of more minimalist style. But I don't know if people know this. If you pull back the flap, there's a little note there that says, "Sweetheart, Miss Bixby." And I didn't even know that was there until a reader pointed it out to me. Like I had already had my copies and had no idea, because I never take the jacket off. So that's a little Easter egg for you.
That's cool. I like that. Thanks for sharing that. So you did talk a little bit about this, but they want to know what you like to read, and do you have a favorite author or favorite book other than yourself?
What I like to read? I like to read just about everything. I read fiction and nonfiction. I read poetry, not a lot of poetry, but some poetry. I love picture books. This is where I work, so
cool. We love these shots.
Over there, and there's a lot of books over there. It's pretty much just book and Lego, honestly, is what I'm surrounded by. And, I was an English major and got a master's degree in literature, so I read a lot through college, and I've kept reading since. And reading really is the #1 avenue towards being a writer. Like, you cannot become a writer if you're not reading constantly, because that's where you learn your craft. Do I have a favorite? I have lots of favorites. I have too many favorites. It's impossible to ask a writer who their one favorite writer is. Like, I love Michael Chabon, and I love see, now you're putting me on the spot. Obviously I've read Harry Potter like 87 times. Because I've even been to the Harry Potter world, and oh God, and there were so many good books that came out this year. Raimi Nightingale, and Ghost, and it's more books that stick with me than particular authors, because there's just so many out there that I just can't read the same author over and over again. But I love Kate DiCamillo. She's awesome, and I grew up loving Stephen King, honestly. Like when I was in high school, that's all I read was Stephen King, because that guy knows how to tell a good story.
He does.
And so, yeah, I mean, there's just too many. I could list 100, like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. I mean, there are books that have stuck with me. The Tao of Pooh, like, oh, there's just everybody has their own list. Go make your own list.
That's right. They wanted to know, what's the hardest part about writing for you? And then the flip side of that, what's the easiest part for you?
The hardest part for me is probably the hardest part for a lot of the people listening, and that would be revision. Especially like the 5th time around. You're really sick of looking at this thing. And the fact that you can still find things to change is depressing, right? Because you're like, wow, I've been through this 4 times already, and I didn't catch that. How bad am I? I really should be a lot better at this by this point. So revision is tough. It takes a lot of commitment. It takes a lot of persistence. It takes a completely different mindset. Probably the best part for me, the part I enjoy most, is the very first page. Just looking at that blank screen on the first day where I'm going to start a new book. And thinking to myself, this could be anything, right? This could be absolutely magnificent. And it's a little downhill from there. Because you have these grand images, for just how amazing it's going to be. And it turns out pretty good, and you're pretty happy with it, But at the same time, like, that's the moment, right? That moment is just first inspiration. The other thing I love is just walking into a bookstore the very first day that a book is out. And my name right there on the shelf. That's an amazing moment. And I hope the kids who are listening, whether you decide to become a writer or a ballet dancer or an engineer or, sell stocks or whatever it is that you're going to do with your life, I hope it contains those moments where you can look at the work you've done and be so overwhelmingly proud of it that you're just sort of beside yourself with joy. Because, don't let authors fool you. Like, part of us is really humble, but part of us really loves that moment of saying, wow, that's me.
Yeah.
I did it, right?
That's so cool. Okay, another question. Do you have any pets?
I do. I do have one pet. I have a cat named Oreo, named after the world's best-selling cookie. She's 18 years old.
Wow.
Which in human years is like 130 or something ridiculous. So she's getting on in age, and she's very annoying and wakes me up at 4 o'clock in the morning to feed her. And she's afraid of her own poop. What else can I say? Yeah, I mean, literally just runs down the hall, down the stairs as soon as she's done, like trying to get as far away from it as possible. I don't know why. She likes to sit on my keyboard while I'm working, you know, all the things. I have to bring out a chair for her to sit on so that she can just sit next to me and not on the desk, you know. But it's a joy to have pets. I love having pets. And Oreo is the only person who can be in the room while I'm working. If it comes into this room through that door, I completely freak out. Like, I pause because they've sort of broken the little sphere, the little force field I've created where I'm in my own little world. And I know I'm no longer in my own little world, so you've kicked me out of my own little world. So it's very frustrating to me. And so I just wait there patiently for you to say whatever it is that you have to say and then leave so I can get back to my own little world. So for that reason, I tend to only write between the time of 8 and 1 o'clock while my kids are at school. So that I can be in the moment, you know, when people are actually around wanting to be with me.
That's very considerate of you.
Isn't that nice of me?
It is. It's great. All right. Let's see. Another question. This is a toughie, and I spoiler alert just in case. But everybody's asking, why did you choose the ending that you did?
Because that is the ending. That is right. I mean, I hate to say it, but Margaret Atwood story wrote there is only like one end, right? And again, I don't know how much we're supposed to give away here, but it's one of those things that you just have to cope with it. You have to deal with it, and a lot of the book is finding ways to deal with it. And I think I would have disappointed myself, and I think I would have done a disservice to the three boys and what they've learned and how they've grown, and the strength that they found in each other and that Miss Bixby has given them if I had ended it any other way. And so I mean, I knew from the beginning
that was what was going to happen.
For sure. So then for me, it was a question of how do I earn it as an author? How do I earn it for these three characters so that it was a worthwhile journey and that there's something that you can take away from it? Right.
No. It was perfect.
No, it was perfect, but it was the way it had to be, right?
It had to be that way. I agree. Here's a fun one. If you could have dinner with 4 famous people, who would they be? What would you eat? And where would you go to do that?
Oh, that's complicated. Wow.
I know.
All right. Where would I go to do that? So I think I would go to Hawaii and I would have Chicago-style deep dish pizza. Because everybody likes pizza, right? So you don't have to worry about offending anybody. So the question is, who are the 4 famous people? Can they be living or?
They can be living, dead.
All right. Wow. So let's go with. I mean, let's just go with something that would provide interesting conversation, right? So we'll go with like Julius Caesar and Albert Einstein and Mark Twain, right? Because who doesn't want a smart aleck, right? Sitting at making fun of everybody else. And then my mother, because, wow, she can carry a conversation, right? And so whenever I sort of turtle up and get antisocial, right, she'll make sure that everybody's still having a good time. So yeah, Mom, Julius Caesar, Albert Einstein, Mark Twain. It's a good combo, right?
It's a great combo. And the pizza, I mean.
And the pizza, I mean, you can't go wrong with the pizza. Right?
And would you have dessert?
You would have to have dessert. Yeah, you would definitely have dessert. Make your own sundae bar, I think, with like 150 toppings, right? 20 different kinds of ice cream, you know, that kind of thing. I'd go with that. I want everybody to be happy.
That sounds good. That sounds very good. Okay. And one last question. They would like any advice for aspiring authors who are listening.
All right. Advice for aspiring authors. Okay, so there's 5 things you need to become an author. All right, you ready?
Okay.
The first is chocolate.
Of course.
Absolutely, right? Chocolate, I mean, it contains like sugar and a little bit of caffeine, and it releases endorphins in your brain. It's an absolute requirement. Don't eat a lot, just a little bit every day. Okay. Second thing you need is inspiration. Right? You need something that it is that you see in the world that drives you on. And, you know, for me, that's other books, other stories, my kids, their friends, the people that I eavesdrop on while I'm waiting in line at the grocery store. And you take that inspiration and you add the next ingredient, which is imagination. And that's just that muscle that you have to keep using in your head, because if you don't use it, it's going to atrophy. It's going to dry up and shrivel up and die. And I think I see that happen in adults all the time, that they don't use their imagination enough and they don't know how to use it anymore. You take the inspiration of the chocolate and the imagination, and then you add perseverance. Because like I said, I started writing when I was 18. I got published for the first time when I was 30. That's 12 years. To get a book on the shelf, right? It takes a long time. You have to learn a lot. You have to try really hard, and you have to persevere to keep revising it again and again and again. And the last thing you need is passion. Whatever it is that you're going to do, be so passionate about it that you would not choose to do anything else with your life, right? It's not something that you just happen onto. It's not something that you do just because you can. It's something you do because you have to. And everybody's going to have something like that in their life. It's just a question of whether or not you're going to be steered in the right direction to find it. And that's what great teachers like Miss Bixby are for, are to help steer you to discover what your passion is, so that you can pursue it. For me, my passion has always been reading and writing. And so that's what I do. And that's what causes me to get up and do it every day. And when you're passionate, like, you don't have a choice, right? Notice one thing I did not say: talent. If you have it, more power to you. I'm not sure I have that much, maybe just a little bit. But if you only have a little bit, then guess what? Passion and inspiration and imagination and perseverance and chocolate can see you through.
That's going to carry it, right?
That's going to carry it. It's going to win the day.
That's wonderful. I love that. Is there anything else that you would like to tell the people who are listening?
Just to find whatever it is that floats their boat, right? And I don't mean that just in terms of like the bigger issues of life where I'm just talking about passion. I also mean it in terms of books, because there's so many out there, and that's what I love so much about this. Like, when I was growing up, there was no such thing really as middle grade fiction. Like, we hadn't sort of defined it, in those terms. There were children's books and there were adult books, and there weren't a ton of children's books to choose from. And now it's just mind-boggling, right? The millions of choices you have at your disposal. So if you're the kind of kid who's like, I really don't like to read, then I would say to you, I would sort of challenge you and say, write book yet, right? And it might not be Miss Bixby's Last Day. Like, my books are not all alike, and they're certainly a lot different from a lot of other authors out there. So find whatever it is that engages you and drives you and interests you, and lock onto it, because you'll learn a lot from the process.
Thank you. Well, we're at the end of our time for our hangout today. I want to a huge thank you to you, Dave. This has been so much fun. You made it easy.
All right.
It's great to share with you. I also want to thank Patty Rosati from HarperCollins, because she helped us get connected.
Thanks, Patty.
Yeah, she's great. A special thank you to all the students who submitted questions, and for everyone who's reading and talking about who they think is going to win the Newbery. I want to thank the teachers and librarians who are working with them. I want to thank Angela Noelette, who's from our online services, who's our technical wizard today. And I also want to thank the KCLS Foundation, because they funded our initiative this year. I want to remind everybody that there's a link on our website later today, and you can click on it. Tell all of your friends, if they didn't get to see it right now, that they can watch it later, and it'll be there for forever, I guess. Anyway, I want to, again, thank you, Dave, and have everybody have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay.